Hello everybody, welcome back. We are here at Pastime Tattoo. I am Ben Verhoek and you are watching Tattooing with Ben. In this video, we're going to be talking about tattooing darker skin tones, whether it's African American skin, Hispanic skin, more melanated skin. It's a little bit different than tattooing people who are fair skinned, and there's different ways to go about it. And it's important that your artist knows how to do this, especially if you yourself is someone who has more melanin in their skin. It's important to know that your artist who you're going to get tattooed by knows the difference between tattooing someone with fair skin and tattooing someone with more melanated skin, because if they don't, they could really fuck you up. So if you don't know anything about the difference between tattooing darker skin, after watching this video, you will. So yeah, let's get right into it. So first off, it's important to know that more melanated skin, specifically African American skin, is definitely more prone to keloiding and scarring. It's very easy to scar them, especially if you're doing a tattoo style like realistic black and gray, where you're kind of building up the layers of shading and you're kind of going over the same spot over and over. You're going to be able to scar someone with more melanated skin if you're going over a spot a lot. The artist has to be very conscious of that and know these things before tattooing someone with darker skin. They're going to end up fucking someone up, and that's going to fuck their reputation up. It's going to fuck their shop's reputation up, and those are all bad things. You don't want none of that shit to happen. A very common thing about tattooing darker skin tones, color is going to look a little bit different than on fair skin tones. I could break down the science behind that as well. When you get tattooed, the needle is putting the ink past the top layer, which is the epidermis of skin, into the layer below that, which is the dermis. And then once that skin starts healing, there's ink that is on the top layer of skin, and once that peels in the healing process, the color of the skin is over the color of the tattoo, which tints it a little bit. If it's a fair skin, like, you know, a really pale white person, it's not going to be so noticeable. It's the colors are going to look true to what the colors are. But if you have darker skin tones that are over the color of the tattoo, it's going to kind of tint that color. So that's not to say that people with darker skin can't get color tattoos. It's just that the artist has to know how to make those colors look right in darker skin tones. The way I like to explain it is like this. Imagine you have a bright yellow highlighter and you have like a white piece of paper, and you run that yellow highlighter down the white piece of paper. That yellow line is going to look yellow, true to the color that it is on the pen. Now, if you get that same yellow highlighter and you get a piece of like brown cardboard and you run a yellow line down that brown cardboard, it's going to be a lot harder to see that, even though it's the same yellow marker and the same yellow ink you put on that white piece of paper. Because it's on a darker background, it's a little bit harder to see that lighter color. And it's kind of the same way when you're putting lighter colors on darker skin. Now, there's ways you could still make colors look good on darker skin. You just have to be a little bit conscious of a few things. One of the things is the client's undertone of their skin tone. For instance, some people's skin tone is a little bit more warm, like colors that are closer to the reds and yellows in the color spectrum. And some people's skin tones are a little bit cooler, which is like closer to the blues and greens and purples on the color spectrum. I mean, I guess not green unless you're a fucking alien, but some people have more blue undertone, etc. So once you recognize what color temperature the undertone is of your client, let's say you have a client who has a little bit more of warm tone, reds, yellow undertone to their skin. Then when the artist is designing their tattoo and choosing out the colors, the best thing to do if they have a warmer undertone of their skin tone is to pick the main subject matter of the tattoo. The colors for that tattoo should also be warmer colors. Those are going to show up a lot better on skin that has warmer undertone. Things like, for instance, if you have a rose and the person has warm undertones of their skin, then maybe you want to do a red rose or an orange rose or a pink rose or a yellow rose, because it'll show up a lot better than, say, a blue rose. If the main subject is a cool color on someone with a warm undertone, once it heals, those colors will kind of look a little bit more muddy. And that's not to say you can't have cool tones in the tattoo at all. You just want the main things to be matching their skin tone, and maybe the supplemental things, like for instance a rose, the supplemental parts like the leaves and stuff, that could be a cool tone, and it won't exactly fuck up the tattoo as a whole. When we're talking about black and gray tattoos, the darker the skin tone, the less you're gonna see a lot of those very subtle, light, soft shades of gray. With any tattoo, it's optimal that you have as much contrast as possible. And by contrast, I mean the difference between your darkest darks and your lightest lights, and everything in between. When you have darker skin and you're doing black and gray and the lightest lights aren't as visible as on fair skin, you have to keep that in mind, have a different approach to how you're going to shade it to where you could still shade it properly without using the lightest lights in such a way that still shows contrast and has maybe a little bit more open skin to show the lightest lights without having the light actual shading on it. So that way you could still have your dark values and your light values and still have optimal contrast without beating up the skin unnecessarily with the light shades that aren't even going to show up once it's healed. Another thing that tattooers have to keep in mind when tattooing dark skin is with really dark skin, colors that contain a lot of white in it, whether it's white itself or like super light baby blues or like lavenders or super light pink, where it takes a lot of white ink mixed with whatever color to make that lighter color, those don't really tend to heal and show that well. So you have to be conscious about which colors you're choosing to be able to, yes, still show contrast, but not have such a light color that it looks good for the picture, but once it heals, it's gonna not look so well. That client won't come back and your reputation might get a little fucked up from that. And especially when you're talking about white tattoos, it'll show up when you tattoo it, but after it heals, it's more likely to turn brown or yellow or pink or something like that. And you know, you got to find ways to assess if that skin tone is right for white ink, or if there's ways you could show contrast or highlights without using white ink. So that way you don't wind up with someone who's angry at you because what used to look white is now tinted and muddy and not so well. Tattooing darker skin is very much a different process, and it's very important that the artist knows these things so they don't fuck them up, they don't scar them, they don't give them a shitty tattoo, they don't make muddy colors, they don't make black and gray tattoos that lack contrast. And if you are a person of color who has more melanated skin, has darker skin tones, before you go get tattooed by a new tattooer, make sure they know what they're doing and the difference between tattooing darker skin from tattooing fair skin. You don't want to wind up with a shitty tattoo just because you trusted someone only to find out later they didn't know this difference. So I hope this video could have been helpful for you to learn about the difference between tattooing darker skin compared to lighter skin, and I appreciate you watching this, and I'll see you next time.
I'm Joey Greco, and thanks for watching another astonishing episode of
Tattooing with Ben.